to our design review board Wednesday, May 21st at 2 p.m. We'll take attendance.
So noted.
So noted. Everybody's here. Great. Any public comment? It's your time to step up to the microphone. My right, your left, if you'd like to make a comment on any of the agenda items here today. If not, we'll close public comment and then move on for approval of the minutes from May 7th. Is there a motion?
So moved.
And support?
And support.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, passes 3-0. New items are signs at 6255 Telegraph Road, Primrose School. Corey, welcome.
Thank you. So our first sign case tonight is 6255 Telegraph Road for Primrose. The property is zoned RM. This is our multifamily district. You can see pretty much every property that touches it is similarly zoned, even across the street. There is some office zoning to the south, and then some single-family residential across the street. This is an aerial of the property showing you where it sits within our community. It fronts right along Telegraph Road. To the rear is an assisted living facility. To the south is offices, and to the north is some residential.
Under construction already.
And then they are proposing 1 ground sign and 2 wall signs. The ground sign is going to be 5 feet by about 4 feet and sit on a stone base. The sign will be 2-faced and it'll be internally illuminated. And then on the building, there's going to be 2 of these on each corner of the kind of tower section here of the building. And that's it for my presentation.
So Corey, we're just looking at the signage for approval.
Correct.
Okay. Is there anything unusual or different that is?
So the only thing that's unusual is the fact that the RM district has some limitations about wall signs, but we looked at how this has been treated in the past for non-residential uses in the district, and we have allowed wall signs in the past, so we don't consider there to be any issues.
Okay, any questions?
And a variance will be needed for the second sign
Okay.
From the ZBA.
from the ZBA.
And the second could be either the wall signs or the ground sign?
So it's actually going to be 2 because there's 2 wall signs proposed. So there's 3 signs total.
Right, the ground sign and 2 wall signs.
Correct.
Okay.
So to answer your question, Martin, 1 would be permitted by right. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, so they could do the ground sign by right, or 1 wall sign by right, or?
I don't think it specifies which one.
It would only be the ground sign, because in the RM, we only permit a ground sign. That's where the oddity is within the ordinance. So the ground sign would be the one permitted by right. The wall signs, because they're not identified as permitted within RM, they're actually seeking a variance to have signs in RM. But like Corey stated, we have done that in the past historically. But to answer your question, I would say the primary permitted sign in the RM classification would be that ground sign.
So we could approve the ground sign as presented, they could proceed with that, and then go to the ZBA for the wall signs.
Absolutely.
Thanks. And is there, the size of the ground sign is within the requirements?
Correct.
Can you let them know the size?
Yep, so the ground sign is 4 feet, or 5 feet tall by 4 feet wide. It's on a 1 foot by 5 foot 2 inch base.
Okay.
I'd be happy to make a motion,
Okay.
try to, approve the ground sign as presented and refer the logo, the wall signs for review by the ZBA.
Support?
Support.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, passes. Thank you, Corey. All right, now we're at 6405 Telegraph Road, the IEP Motor City Orthopedic Urgent Care.
Yep, so this next sign application is for 6405 Telegraph Road. It is actually pretty close to our last sign request. It is 2 parcels to the south. It is in the O1 office kind of complex there to the south of where the Primrose School will go. Looking at an aerial, it fronts along Telegraph and the kind of Maple Street access drive. To the north is multifamily residential. To the rear is more single-family residential. And across the street is primarily commercial. This is the proposed sign as it will look. Here are the dimensions. So one of the things we looked at was the logo size. But we did do the calculations. The logos are compliant. They're less than 5% of the sign area. This is where it'll sit on the building, above the front windows, underneath kind of the overhang facing Telegraph Road. If you drive by the property right now, you'll notice there are two signs, one facing Telegraph Road, one facing to the south on that kind of same corner. They're proposing to remove the one that is facing to the south. There will just be one sign facing Telegraph Road.
Good work.
And
That probably took some convincing.
no, maybe Andrew did more work than I did. So here is where it'll sit on the building, 152 inches above grade. And then this shows you the projection. It's gonna be about 5 inches. And there you go.
Any questions, comments?
Is that considered one logo or two?
I would consider it two logos.
Because this is an O1 zoning classification, we don't regulate logo sizes. What we wanted to do was demonstrate their scale to the sign. And it does appear that they meet the 5% of the scale, but we actually can't regulate it within the O1.
Okay.
And the sign is otherwise compliant in its size.
Correct.
Happy to make a motion.
Okay, good.
And we approve the sign as presented.
Support.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No, passes 3-0. Thank you. All right, Corey, 1595 South Updike Road, Total Wireless.
So for our final sign for today, 1595 South Opdyke, this one is located at the corner of Opdyke and Square Lake. Anyways, it's in the Hollywood Market Complex.
South Boulevard.
Sorry?
South Boulevard, sorry.
Thank you. All right, so it sits in the Hollywood Market Complex here at that intersection. It is zoned B1 business. Adjacent zoning, there's office, and then primarily to the rear is residential. Giving you an overview of the property, you can see across the street, which is Pontiac, is mostly commercial development, including to the north, residential to the south. And then this is the sign as presented. You'll notice there's no logo proposed. It's just the name of their business. It's a very simple sign. It is 30 inches by 150 inches. Let's see. Oh, and it'll project just a few inches from the wall. It's a 2-inch deep box. And then the applicant also shared other examples of signage in the same complex. So you'll see it'll sit in quite well with the existing arrangement. And then here's a little rendering of what it'll look like when it's put up.
Nice. Okay, any questions?
No? I'll move that we approve the sign as submitted.
Support?
Support.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, passes. Thank you. All right, B, site plan, 7200 Telegraph Road, the Enclave at Bloomfield.
Can you call up your email with that presentation? We can do it that way. Well, either way. We'll see which one's quicker.
Yeah. Doesn't matter which one.
Second one, probably.
You can go back to ours. Great.
It was in this one. Oh. Sorry, give me 1 minute here.
Good afternoon, I'm Andrea Bibby with the Planning Division here at the Township. I am going to walk you through the proposal before you for consideration on behalf of Robertson Brothers for a new residential housing development that is proposed at currently address 7200 Telegraph As many of you are familiar, there's 2 vacant parcels that are, actually not 2, there's currently the 1 vacant parcel north of Temple Bethel, and as part of this request, I do want to note that we will also be reviewing some changes to the Temple Bethel site that are resultant in this proposal. So first I'll walk through the enclave site plan, and then I'll get into how the enclave proposal leads to a site plan application for some slight modifications to Temple Bethel.
But, Andrea, so we'll vote on 2 and 3 separately, though, even though
Yes,
they're.
please.
Okay.
Please. So I'm going to do a brief presentation and walk you through what the proposal is, and then I'm also going to give you a review in terms of how this proposal does and does not comply with our ordinance. And then I do know that Robertson Brothers is also here to present, probably in a little more detail, their proposal, so I know they're prepared to do that as well. So when looking at the site, what we have before you, again, located at 14 Mile and Telegraph Road, just north of the Temple Bethel property, Robertson Brothers is seeking site plan approval. What they're seeking is a 1-family residential cluster housing option. That is considered a site condo development option within our zoning ordinance. So within that, it allows for the cluster housing option does require it to be located after a major thoroughfare. So they do meet the required 150-foot major thoroughfare coming in off Telegraph Road. Another requirement of the cluster housing option is that they are able to make a decision whether or not they're truly clustered, meaning a standard attached unit, or they are also, our ordinance also allows them an option. It doesn't require them to be attached. So what we're trying to do here, and what I'm trying to present to you, is a very creative example of how they want to use the single-family cluster option to accommodate their plan. So the overall acreage of this proposal is a total of 12.83 acres, and that this includes 5.02 acres that is being acquired as part of that Temple Bethel property. Again, located to the north, so as part of this proposal, it will require them to split that 5.2 acres from the Temple Bethel property to the south. The units themselves that are being proposed are not attached. They are seeking a variety of variances, so if I could kind of walk through some of the variances. First of all, in the single-family house, 1-family cluster option, the parcel is not to exceed 10 acres. Our ordinance states that for a single-family cluster option development, it's a maximum land area of 10 acres. In this instance, the applicant actually is requesting a larger, and would have to seek a variance to have a slightly larger property coming in at the 12.83 acres. So they're actually coming in over that minimum 10-acre requirement. Also within our within the cluster housing option, we do have requirements and allotments to allow for a higher dwelling unit per acre. Specifically, and highlighted on your screen, the applicant has provided this graphic which shows the first 360 feet from Telegraph Road, as well as the remaining linear feet to the rear of the site. The reason why this is important is because within the ordinance, as it relates to the cluster, it states that the density within the first 360 feet, which would essentially be to the right of that red line, they would be permitted to exceed the 1.7 dwelling units per acre per the 1-family cluster option. So that is an advantage of the cluster housing option, is that it does allow for a higher density per acre, coming in at 1.7 dwelling units per acre. However, within the rear portion, the density allotment within our ordinance is 4.5 dwelling units per acre. So the applicant, essentially, is what they're doing, they are taking the overall density for that 12 acres and using the calculation, if you will, for the cluster housing option. So I just want to clarify that the intention of the cluster would be to have the larger density, maybe attached units. Again, we have to think back historically, the writers, drafters of this ordinance, that was their intention, most likely, was to have greater density towards the main thoroughfare and then having more of a less dense transition, if you will, until you get to that rear property. I also do want to note, and again, the applicant has their presentation as well. They are asking for some smaller setbacks that may be required within the underlying R1 zoning classification. They are asking for the variance of up to 27 feet for the required front yard setback, a variance of 15 feet for the required 30-foot side yard setback, and that's as it relates to a cluster housing option and specifically a corner unit. They are unable to meet that setback requirement, so it's not throughout the site, it's specific to a unit that is unable to meet that requirement. An interesting thing that we've determined as part of this review, the ordinance requires that when you cluster, so if you're going to cluster the units, say 5 or 6 into a unit, the required setback would be 30 feet between units, okay? What it doesn't give us, it does not give us or provide us with a direct side yard setback as it relates to a cluster. So what we're utilizing, or for comparative purposes, our standard underlying zoning would require 16 feet between units, then becoming 32 between each lot. In this instance, they are seeking smaller side yard setbacks to equal a total of, I should have that readily
I
available.
think it was 14 feet between each unit.
And I believe that you're right. I don't know why I don't have that, I apologize. So the 14 feet between units. And then additionally, they are gonna be asking for some modifications to their entryway, which is not uncommon, as we've seen this in some of the other more recent developments, where they want to do a grand entrance off Telegraph Road, where they will be seeking masonry walls, as well as a entrance gate and columns within the Telegraph Road frontage. So they definitely would have to also seek approval for those accessory structures before the Zoning Board of Appeals. As part of their proposal, I do want to note that there are currently existing wetlands that are located on the property. These wetlands have been reviewed, and there have been site visits with both the applicant's wetland consultant as well as Niswander Environmental, who is our township's consultant. And they have provided a report, and in summary, the applicant is seeking to utilize the southeast corner portion of the property to help manage stormwater, as well as to provide, kind of do a double duty, if you will, allowing for that stormwater management requirement, as well as mitigating any of the wetlands into this common area. As part of their proposal, in order to help mitigate the existing wetlands, which I will note, and it is noted within the staff report, and I just want to clarify that sometimes when we hear the word wetland, it sounds to be a very highly sensitive area, with a lot of nature and natural features and good character and good hydrology and what have you. That's why we do have our consultant go out there and actually grade and verify the quality of the wetlands. So as part of the report that was submitted on behalf of our Niswander consultant, they do make a notation that the wetlands that are currently on site really are filled with a lot of invasive species, buckthorn, and what have you. So just wanted to share that with you in terms of the narrative and understanding that sometimes if designed properly, the intention would be, and the goal of the township would be that anything that's resultant is actually, we're putting it better than it was previously. And that will have to be a presentation on behalf of the applicant. So I just want to make note about that. In terms of site access, the access is proposed to be off a new curb cut off Telegraph Road. That curb cut would require any permitting and approvals through the Michigan Department of Transportation. That is, Telegraph Road is an MDOT thoroughfare. Again, 38 units, I'm not sure if I said that exactly, 38 units are proposed on the 12.83 acres. I also want to note that because the applicant is seeking to do fire suppression within the units, it took away a secondary access requirement from the fire department. That was a selection on behalf of the applicant to meet the requirements to provide adequate fire protection, but not necessarily having to create a second ingress and egress to the development itself. I'm just trying to get to the landscape plan. So as the site is surrounded by single-family residential to the north and to the west. So the orientation of this proposal would be rear yard to rear yard orientation. I do want to say that they are meeting the required 40-foot rear yard setback, which is actually 5 foot greater than our standard 35-foot rear yard setback. So in terms of the rear yard to rear yard orientation, they are meeting that rear yard requirement. I do also want to point out that there has been a very robust landscape plan that has been provided as part of this package, which does indicate that they do plan on doing a double row of dense vegetative planting along the entire northerly property line as well as the westerly property line to accommodate and to hope to mitigate any visual concerns from the adjacent property owners. The homes themselves are proposed to be approximately 2,000 square feet, not uncommon to other recently approved single-family residential developments in the township where they tend to range from about 2,500 to about 3,000 square feet. In terms of the landscaping, because the applicant is removing such a high amount of caliper of trees, they're unable to replace in kind the number. Specifically, they have to replace 1,758 caliper of trees. And because of that, they do have to seek a variance because they are unable to meet that letter of the law, if you will, in the ordinance. However, I do want to point out that the intention of the tree replacement is to make sure that an applicant is providing significant vegetation, they are providing screening, and they are replacing any of those landmark trees or really significant trees. In this instance, their tree removal, although they are unable to meet the requirement, they do note that some of the trees that are being removed are very low quality invasive landmark trees such as cottonwoods and box elders, and that can be found within the tree survey that's required to be provided as part of their submittal. So we do have a tree survey that does indicate which trees are proposed to be removed and under what qualifier they are allowed to be removed, or if they're required to be replaced, what is the replacement value. So that analysis has been provided and has been completed and reviewed by our landscape architect. I just want to state that none of the front units meet the units 22 and 29 only have a 13.5 front yard setback, while the other units have a 20-foot setback. A variance would be requested for the front yard setbacks. I do want to note that we do, just for your clarification, if you have any questions, I do have a summary available regarding some other developments that have occurred recently in the township, if the board is so interested, or certainly this would be something that we can forward on to the Planning Commission and other bodies, but we do have some comparatives in terms of other side yard setbacks, rear yard setback orientations, as well as lot sizes to give you an idea of how this may or may not be comparable to other developments within the township. So with that, I did review the host of variances that would be required as part of the submittal. The applicant has provided a series of home renderings to show their intended design aesthetic. Hopefully, Tim, there you go, and here you go. I will let them speak, but I do think it appears to me that this is a similar type of housing product that maybe we have in Villas of Bloomfield or maybe within Legacy Hills. Similar style, low profile, one-story residential structure. So with that, I think I hit on all the main points, because I do want to reserve some time for you to hear from the applicant. In the meantime, why don't I'll skip over the Temple Bethel, let's just keep them separate, and then I'll dip into the Temple Bethel changes once the enclave discussion is over, so we don't confuse things. That works for the board?
Sure. Yep, that'd be great, thank you.
Yep.
Hello, nice to see you. I'm Tim Lochner, I'm the Vice President of Land Acquisition for Robertson Homes. With me tonight is Jim Clark, our CEO. Also have Jack Flynn, our land analyst, and our intern as of 3 days ago, or I guess 5 days ago, Michael Dillon. So,
All right, welcome.
yeah, thank you for your time today. I'm gonna actually load this up. So yes, we've been working on the site for a long time. We're very happy to be here today to present it to you. If you're familiar with our Villas of Bloomfield Grove property, which is the old Hickory Grove Elementary site on Los Urges south of Square Lake, we started that project, I guess before COVID, and we were probably in the mid 800s is where we started, and just the cost of materials and just everything that had raised, those prices went skyrocketing from there. Obviously, we just actually finalized out. We got our last homeowner in there. It looks beautiful. If you've been by it, it really has. I think the landscaping, and it's similar to what we're proposing here, but the landscaping's really has filled in over time. But the reason I bring that up is because a lot of the buyers that came in looking for a home, and this buyer is somebody that wants to stay in your community. This is a buyer that has a colonial in a wonderful school district, but the kids have moved out and they're looking to stay in the community and stay where their churches are, where their friends are, where the restaurants are. And it was a great opportunity, but a lot of them just couldn't get to the numbers at $1.5 million plus. By the time they started putting money into the options, some of those pushed $2 million. There was so much feedback we got from them as far as, you need a lower price point and we'd be interested. We lost a lot of buyers for that. So we had been looking for a site that would really fit into where we could offer a home that's less than that price point. And this is actually right across the street from our office, and there's no way I was going to let somebody else build this. So of course I called on that. But we think this is a really a great opportunity to provide for that home buyer, which there are a lot of them in their community. I'm sure you know exactly what I'm talking about. So just wanted to kind of start with that. From a site context, the site, it's right on Telegraph. Telegraph is a very imposing street. It's very difficult to access it without getting run over. It's not conducive to single family residential whatsoever, particularly a small site like this. When you look around, you see a lot of density. All right, you see the temple to the south, you see multifamily, lots of multifamily all around us. Plus on the office, that purple is where our office building is. So I know this very well. I've been working there 12 years. This is a very high intensity area. So it's not conducive to say single family homes fronting onto Telegraph or anything like that. Now, there could be a case to be made for even higher density than even what we're showing today, as far as maybe additional apartments or senior housing. That's not what we want to build there. That's not what we're proposing. We think what we're proposing is a very good transition from the road, from the multifamily to the single family behind us. I'm going to get into the site plan a little bit. Andrea did a really good job, so some of this will be a little bit of a repeat, but I want to explain a lot of it. The thing I think really your eyes should be drawn to first is that buffer. So we've got a double row of plantings. These are evergreen trees along the northern perimeter and the western perimeter. This is more than we did at Villas of Bloomfield Grove. And this was really born from multiple conversations we've had with the neighborhood. We invited the neighborhood to our office, which wasn't a very far drive. It was just Cross Telegraph, several times, and we had a lot of conversations with them about, this project, about how to buffer to them and what the best use of the property is. So we started out, and I'll show a slide of what we started out with. This is as many trees as you can fit in there, and I think it's appropriate. Now, obviously, you still need the storm drain right along the northern and western perimeter, so we're off of that a little bit, but the intent is to give as much buffer as we can to the existing homeowners, which a lot of them appreciated as we kept evolving the plan. We've also met with the HOA board several times, and I think for the most part they'll probably be in support of this project. Couple reasons why. Obviously, this buffer here. Andrea had mentioned the setbacks. The setbacks in the single-family cluster, one-family cluster ordinance requires 40 feet to the perimeter. We have 40 feet, and that's to the decks. We actually have 55 feet to the homes themselves. So we're exceeding that setback by 15 feet, but it is 40 feet to where the decks start. If you had a single-family home right now in the existing zoning district, you actually go to 35 feet. That's the setback, and you could go to a two-story building. So we're proposing ranches, which again is that product that I think is missing at this price point in your community. So they're single level, plus the additional buffer, plus the additional setback to 55 feet, whereas right now you could go 35 feet with a two-story. So I think that started to resonate as we started to tell our story. A couple other things to note on the site plan. You have, I don't know, here's my cursor. We do have one single entrance, as Andrea had mentioned, and we have worked that out with the fire department. And I think that's important. There's really wasn't a way to punch out to the residential, but we wouldn't have proposed that anyway. We wanted our access to go straight to Telegraph and not through the neighborhood. That wouldn't make any sense from our standpoint, certainly not for the neighborhood. We would like to make it similar to Villas of Bloomfield Grove, maybe even more modern in some respects, but make it similar to Bloomfield Groves with a gated entry, which I believe the HOA at Villas of Bloomfield Grove has now started to operate, or they're going to soon. This would be open during the day and then potentially closed at night. So that would be part of the plan as well. And then I think the other thing that really jumps out is just the green space on the site. So technically it's about 20% open space. That's to the letter of the law with your ordinance. In reality, we're actually more than 50% open space. So that's a real win just in general, how much open space there is. Nobody has a backyard here, so what happens is they actually own the home itself, and then they own the area with the deck. Everything else is general common element space, which means the HOA maintains all of it. You can't have a tot lot back there, you can't have a pool, you can't do anything like that. That's all common space. So it'll always be green, it'll always have trees, it'll always be maintained by the HOA. And they're very vigilant about maintaining that. So that's I think a really important thing to point out on this site. The other thing, just again, I talked about the impact from Telegraph. There is a requirement as far as a berm along Telegraph, which we're providing. But generally speaking, that is a big impact, which is why our price point will be less here than it would be at Villas of Bloomfield Grove. The other thing, and Andrea did kind of touch on this a little bit, so the pond at the southeast corner, that is oversized by about 50%. From what we would need, generally speaking, for a pond. And the reason why is because it's also going to function as a wetland mitigation area. So when we first had our consultant go out there, they came back and said you have no wetlands on site, nothing that's regulated. And we were proceeding that way, and then they worked with Nice Wander, and Nice Wander said, okay, they're not Eagle regulated, but the township is regulating them. And our consultant didn't think that was even going to be a thing, but it did. So we've had a lot of conversations with Nice Wander over the last several months, last year, and have come up with a solution that they're happy with as far as mitigating with wetland plantings on this new pond. So there'll be a couple feet of water in there, and then wetland plantings around, which have been approved by Nice Wander. So they have full support for our plan, as does engineering. So that did take some time to get through, but I think from a environmentally speaking, of course, we're providing for the wetland replacement, if you will. but also from a visual perspective too. It adds a lot more greenery to the site. But again, none of these wetlands are eagle regulated whatsoever, so we don't need to go through eagle for anything. A couple other things. You'll notice there's also a buffer to the south. And what I kind of failed to mention, I probably should have mentioned by now, there are multiple sellers. So there's the owner of the 7200 Telegraph parcel in the center. And then the temple actually owns the parcel to the north, about, I guess, the top third. And they also own the bottom third. And that would be, we're purchasing that area, if you will, the meets and bounds description of that, of their existing site. We're not really taking any of their parking lot or any of their improvements away. It's just vacant property, and incorporating it into this project. That will be the next thing you see, is the temple site plan amendment to accommodate this, losing that land and putting it into here. But the reason I bring up the temple, first of all, you can see there's quite a bit of buffer there. But second of all, the reason that they, and I don't want to put words in the temple's mouth, and I will have people here at the next public hearings that can speak to this. But they're very interested in this particular type of housing, of this type of development or land use, because it provides a lot of security for them. So it provides privacy, it provides security. They don't want a vacant lot there. So that's why they wanted to sell this to us. And this particular use, eyes on the street, people that are home most of the time, and generally speaking, it's not a 3, 4, 5-story building overlooking their temple. So this is something that they wanted to see, and we're happy to work with us on the plan. And we did work quite a bit with their land planner. They had a land planner that they had us kind of help guide the site plan along. So I think that's important too, that it's something that the temple to the south of us does want to see. And of course, yes, we're paying them for the land, but it's also a security and a land use interest on their part. And then the last thing I want to point out is there's a lot of trees on here. I can't fit any more trees, which is the reason for the variance request. What I will say is we're planting 644 trees, and we're taking out roughly 425, 450. I don't know the exact number, I'm sorry. But we're 178% higher as far as number of trees. The discrepancy for the variance is the actual DBH caliper inches, because there are larger trees there. What I will say is these trees will grow, similar to what happened at Villas of Bloomfield Grove. In addition, and the trees that are there really are not of high quality. If you walk it now, you'll see this is not what was a 50-year or 150-year tree stand. It was farmed at one point. They're not high quality trees, essentially, is what I'm saying. So the replacement of it, tree for tree, we're actually far above what we're taking out. I wanted to touch on this a little bit. I think Andrea spoke briefly about this, and it's really hard to see, and I apologize. But essentially what this is saying is, I call it a parallel plan, but if we developed under the existing ordinance, word for word, we could build that plan on the top right. That plan on the top right is 39 attached units. The same unit that we're proposing, but stick them together. We wouldn't need any variances in that respect. And it's actually 2 different parcels with a joint storm pond, which is technically possible, and that would get out of any of the variances. We don't want to do that. Our buyers don't want to see that. I don't think the neighborhood wants to see that, because now you're just having these long blocks of homes together. We're proposing detaching them because that's what people want to buy, and that's what the market really is. So that is why there are some of the requests for the variances and the 14-foot separation. Again, we could put them all together. That I don't think that's conducive for the township or the neighborhood or for us or for our buyers. So we're not proposing to do that, but that's just to demonstrate that if we did do that, we could get 39 units where, as we're showing, 38 units, which is what we're showing, 38 units on the detached plan. I think this is important. I think you all know this, but I kind of want to say it anyway. And this is not unique to Bloomfield Township. you have a lot of houses to build for this particular buyer profile. And I'm talking about residents over 65 years of age. I'm not sure how much I believe some of these net drops in population, but this comes straight from SEMCOG. And that is what we use for population estimates. And what they're saying essentially is you're gonna grow, but only in the 65 plus. Regardless of how accurate, the negative is, I think it's safe to say you do need more housing for that type of buyer to stay, again, what I mentioned before, stay in your community. They wanna be in your community, of course they do. Or they wanna aspirational come to your community from another community. This is an option for them to do that. And that's 70 new residents annually over the next 30 years. And again, I kind of mentioned this, but not only does it give an opportunity to downsize from a larger colonial, but what that does is it frees up inventory for people to move into your community that want to enjoy the great schools you have. So it's a little counterintuitive to think that this will increase your school-age population, but it will. This will create opportunities now for people to buy the homes that, frankly, they're not moving from because they don't have an option. The other thing to point out is, I've got it here from our traffic experts, it's not just traffic, it's also utilities. This particular plan or housing product is just over half of the impact for traffic, for utility use. And you think about it, usually there's 2 people in each house as compared to a colonial where you've got 3, 4, 5 people living in there. So it's a reduction quite a bit. And a lot of these buyers, some of these buyers, they have another place, over the winter as well. But certainly from a traffic perspective and from a utility perspective, the impact is much less. And of course, we're not even adding any traffic into the neighborhood. I do want to get into quickly the why we think that this is continuing a pattern that's already has been in existence in the township for years. So we wanted to look at other cluster projects that you have in the township that have built over the last several decades. Most of them are along Telegraph, which makes sense, and we all know, I think, which ones we're talking about. Some of them are a little bit outside that as well. But the point is, if you just look at this map, what this tells you is you've, as a township, have concentrated density along Telegraph Road, which is exactly where we're talking about. And when I'm talking density, these are actually higher density than what we're proposing. So I know this is really hard to see, and I apologize, but I can go through some of these. A lot of these are attached condos. Some of them are detached condos, like we're proposing them. Some of them are condo-style apartments, if you will. But we wanted to point out all of the locations. This is actually on the northern corridor, everything north of essentially probably Corton. And these are all the particular, oh, that's helpful. Thanks, Jim. Save your eyes a little bit. But this shows densities, and some of them are 3 times what our density is, 4 times what our density is. So from a density perspective, we're really in line or less than much of these. And we included the building separation as well for the ones that are detached. I did not for the attached, because I think that's apples to oranges. But particularly the ones that say detached condos, we wanted to demonstrate to you, we are not doing anything that's unique whatsoever in the township. You can see Hickory Ridge Villas, that's 10 feet of separation between units. This is something that you would have approved off Telegraph, and it makes sense. It meets, the intent of what the ordinance is to cluster development along these roads here. Bloomfield Chase, which is a little more recent, that's 13-foot building separation. The rest of these are attached. On the southern corridor, again, some of them are down to 6 feet of building separation. The rest of those are apartments, apartment-style condos or attached condos. But we wanted to point it out that we're not trying to do something that doesn't fit into the township where that's unique. We're at 14 foot is what we're proposing, building separation. We did have more villas at Bloomfield Grove. Of course, it's different type of product. Those were side entry for the most part. There was more land, and the price point was just much higher. The price point's gonna be more in line with some of these that we're showing here. And, you know, we've built, in other communities, I hate naming other communities while I'm doing this, so I won't do that, but nearby communities, where these are 11 or 12 feet apart. So, it's not unique to this style of development, whatsoever. I point this out, you wouldn't know this because we hadn't submitted anything to you, but we had met with the neighborhood. We wanted to make sure we were meeting with the neighborhood well in advance of coming to you. The first plan that we showed them was on the left, which frankly is probably more trees than we typically do on a site this size. And you can see then what we went to. So, you know, 50% more trees on the north side, 50% more trees on the west side. And this, I think, really was listening to them as a neighborhood. And you have the neighborhood, there's, I don't know, 200 and some plus homes in the entire neighborhood. But you also have the ones that are directly adjacent to us. I'm gonna show you some pictures or some exhibits that kind of demonstrate the impact we'll have there. But we're sensitive to the impact to the direct neighbors. I've offered, and we've offered, and we do this on every project we do, we've offered, if it makes sense to meet with them after we're constructed and put a couple trees on their backyard to add a little bit more buffer, we're willing to do that. They're a little closer than we are. They're about 35 feet, so there's not that much room to plant, but we've made that offer to them in neighborhood meetings, and I stand by that. But that's in addition to what I'm showing you, which is, again, 644 trees, which is a lot. And you can see a lot of them are in the buffer as well. Those are the cross sections I wanted to demonstrate to you. On the northern section, I have to explain this a little bit. So the very top black and white exhibit of the landscape plan there, that circle, that's where that cross section is being taken. So essentially, this home that you see where it says existing two-story residence under elevation AA, that's an existing home. I think it's probably 2 houses in, compared to what will be our homes to the west of them. So I'm sorry, to the south of them. Sorry, I'm hoping I'm not confusing anybody. But we are lower than them. It drops down in elevation as you go west. And we're also building a single-story ranch. So, you know, you can see the impact kind of the 2-story home compared to where our ranch was. We ghosted in a 2-story home at the 35-foot setback just to show what somebody could build right now today without even going to you guys. And that's not to scare anybody, but that's to show what can be built right now. And you can see we're much lower than that. Obviously, we're half the size, and we're further back. That's that 55-foot building setback that I had mentioned to the property line. And then the double tree line there. There is a power line that goes across, but it's mostly on their side of the property, which really doesn't affect where we can put these trees. The next one on the bottom of that, then these are the actual homes, by the way, the actual dimensions of the homes. Along the western perimeter, you can see where that circle is. That home there, it actually rises a little bit as you go to the east. And I'll show you an exhibit of the drainage. The drainage actually, for the most part, comes from their neighborhood to our neighborhood, and we'll be capturing that. In this case, it actually, it doesn't go from ours to theirs. There's kind of a mound in between, if you will. But that's what that's demonstrating. But it's still, you can see the building separation and the tree buffer that we're proposing. So we wanted to give you an idea of what, in reality, it's really going to be from neighbor to neighbor. That's the drainage map that I was talking about. So essentially, we obviously cannot have any of our stormwater infringe onto existing properties. However, we have to accept what's already coming to our property. There's quite a bit of drainage that's historically coming onto our property, which, by the way, is probably the reason why there's wetlands on the property. It's just taken everything from telegraph, from the neighborhood. It's just kind of sat there for decades and decades. We will continue to take that and put it into our storm system, which would then go into our storm pond. So that's been included in our calculations. What this is showing is those arrows that are coming onto the property, and then that red line is how we're going to convey it into rear yard storm drain out into the storm pond. The area to the southwest, again, that's kind of where there's that berm. At the property line, it kind of goes, both ways, but what I wanted to convey is most of the property does actually come into our property. I know there's been some questions about drainage from the neighborhood. They've talked to us about it. We've tried to demonstrate this. There will be zero impact to them. In fact, it'll be positive. We're gonna take all of that and store it. And it's not gonna be in a just kind of an unmitigated wetland. Hopefully that allays a lot of fears in that respect. From a project summary, Andrea went through a lot of these, so I don't think I need to go to it. The 39 units allowed per ordinance is the exhibit that Andrea had shown. The plan type, I haven't got into it yet a little bit, but it's just over 2,000 square feet. By contrast, Villas of Bloomfield Grove was around 2,750 square feet. So these are a little smaller than those. And again, that's how we get the lower price point. 38 total, total 20 million worth of taxes over 30 years. Obviously a lot of positives to the community. A lot of open spaces, perimeter, in a walkable and inviting community. I think the biggest one is the housing option for residents that are underserved. I can't stress that enough. This is something that we know because we're building it. We know there's demand. We know that people want to stay in your community. And then, not to be shameless self-promotion, but we're celebrating our 80th year of experience. I think that says something. You have
Congratulations.
Thank you
Jim
very
wears
much.
it well.
Jim's been here the whole time. And I'm almost done. I appreciate your time here. From an elevation standpoint, they're a little bit more modern is what we're proposing from Villas of Bloomfield Grove. Villas of Bloomfield Grove is a little more traditional. And these, we think this would be well received in the marketplace. The plan I'm showing you here, it's actually a little bigger than that, but it's essentially the same thing. 2 bedrooms and a den, open great room and dining room, an open kitchen. We won't offer any other plan. We're offering one plan, which sounds very strange, but this is what buyers want. So typically what they'll do is they'll either finish out the basement, or we do want to offer an option to do a Cape Cod, which does not make it a 2-story, but it basically just has the rooms in the rafters upstairs, so you can have 2 rooms up there instead. So that's something that honestly only about 10% of our buyers choose. They usually finish out the basement instead, but that's something that really wouldn't affect the elevation. It's just built into the rafters. And I think that's my last slide, so I'm happy to answer any questions you have. And Jim, did you want to add anything?
The only thing I'd add is,
Will you come up?
Up here. Jim Clark, 6905 Telegraph Road and 2731 West Hickory Grove, so a resident of the township. Word gets out about projects you're looking to do, and so we have had a overwhelming response from people who'd like to hear what we're doing here. These are friends of, at my age, I'm the profile and would hope to be one of the buyers. So I think it would be very well received in your community if we can come to an understanding with the township on what their concerns are. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Jim. So it's not really related to the project, well, it is a little bit, but you talked about it's an HOA that you'll take care of the lawn and maintenance.
Yes.
And then is each home building, the owner responsible for their own building in the sense of replacing a roof, replacing windows, replacing siding over time, painting, upkeep, general upkeep?
Generally, yes. At Villas of Bloomfield Grove was a little different. They had a little bit more responsibility for the buildings themselves. In this case, yes, the HOA would be responsible for replacing the roofs, replacing any siding, replacing any garages, replacing any driveways. So what they do is part of their dues, which are hefty, right? Those part of those dues would go towards reserves, and then the HOA over time, and that includes the roads too. So everything would be then basically upgraded in the future using those reserves.
And would that include like foundation issues as well?
Sure would, yes. Now,
Okay.
I mean, we're gonna have a warranty, obviously, as a builder,
Sure.
but yeah, 40 years down the road, yes.
The HOA would be responsible for pretty much the upkeep, maintenance, and overall
Correct.
care of the buildings as well?
Correct, yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, any questions? Or comments?
You kept referencing a price point, but you didn't say what that is.
What would you all pay? Yeah, I think we want to start certainly under $1 million. I mean, that's our goal. I can't tell you that by the time they they go to our design gallery, that they're not gonna put a few $100,000 to get over that. But our goal the entire time is to be under $1 million. Whatever that means, I don't know, but $900,000 is probably where we're gonna start.
Okay. I'm sure Martin probably has a lot of questions. I see you with some notes there. I have a lot of questions and concerns. Just one point of clarification, being the treasurer, but your calculation for the taxes we would get is incorrect.
Okay.
It's significantly less than that. So we might want to correct that before the next time. What else? I guess, so the temple owns the northernmost parcel, and then the southern parcel, and then somebody else owns the middle parcel.
That's correct.
Okay. And the neighbors that are around the northern and western sides have seen this plan and you say they're in support?
I would say I believe the HOA board will probably be in support. The individual neighbors, we've worked out a number of conversations with them, kind of individually and within this neighborhood meeting outlet. But yeah, what we've told them is we will be amenable to walking with you and possibly adding additional trees on your property if that makes sense. And that allayed a lot of the concerns they had. I'm not gonna say that people aren't gonna come here and possibly complain. It wouldn't be a public hearing that for a development project without that. So I think we've done the best we possibly can, and we're more than willing to continue to work with them.
Okay. And Andrea, did our wetlands consultant, are they satisfied with the drainage plan? That I don't know.
Tim, you might be able to respond to that better, because I think that I believe that Robertson Brothers just did some minor amendments in related to some comments. So I think we're getting to the point where they are fully supportive. So maybe Tim would be better to answer that question.
Yes, we've addressed every comment they had, and that included all drainage concerns, yes.
Okay, so any drainage from the northernmost part of the property will be able to travel down to that basin?
Correct, yes.
Is there an underground system?
It is, so that red line is the storm system.
Okay.
And essentially what I'm not showing here are the catch basins. There'll be catch basin every, few homes that would capture the water, and everything would go convey into those pipes that would then ultimately go out to the forebay, which then goes to the storm pond.
Okay. And
not interrupt, I know you have a thought there,
Sure.
but we're also lower than them as well. So that, I showed you that cross-section, so everything's obviously coming our way, and nothing could possibly go toward them.
from the neighbors,
Correct.
right, okay.
Yes.
And I just want to add that we do have a letter dated March 31st, 2025, that does, from Niswander Environmental, supporting the proposal as is. I just want to note that I believe there's been a couple minor modifications, so that letter may be updated, but we do currently have one on the books that does approve it, or support it.
Is there any kind of traffic study that we would need to reflect? Because I guess my initial concern is that if you're going to put a gate there and you're coming in off of Telegraph, I don't know that there's a deceleration lane that's there, and you don't want to have like a backup on Telegraph.
Sure, so the applicant did provide, as required with any site plan application, traffic impact analysis on behalf of Tetra Tech. That traffic study was approved and supported by Fishbeck based on the information provided within that study, indicating that they do meet the standards as it relates to the traffic impact analysis. And I don't believe there's any recommendations within that report for a decel lane. I'm not sure if you've had conversations with MDOT
We
regarding
have,
that?
yeah,
Okay, so
MDOT
Tim could probably answer
MDOT
that.
has preliminarily approved the project. And I think there might be some discussions as far as, it wouldn't be a full right turn lane, but there's some geometrics that they're working out with their engineers, but they have preliminarily approved the project.
Okay, meaning they're okay with the gate being there?
Yes, yes.
Okay, and did that traffic study also include the internal flow?
It did, yes.
Okay.
Generally speaking, single-family residential is a relatively lower traffic qualifier or a multiplier than other uses. So based on that analysis and what was presented by their traffic engineer at Tetra Tech, Fishbeck didn't have any concerns as related to the impact to the adjacent roadways. And I guess I could just verify, in addition to your, his comment regarding the internal circulation, I guess I could just verify that.
Okay. I guess I want to do a little more research into these comps that you've identified, these other cluster developments. I didn't, I didn't realize Bloomfield Chase was that big, had that many homes, because at first blush, this seems like you're shoehorning a lot into a little space. But I want to reserve my judgment to looking at these other communities. I don't think it's fair necessarily to compare to like the Glens or the Weathersfield that are apartments. It's a little bit of a different structure here than having, separate houses for all intents and purposes with different garages and, I guess, I don't know,
We were trying to show the density that is along the corridors. That was.
yeah,
the
no,
purpose of that.
I understand that, and I appreciate you, you pointing that out, and, it's certainly fair to look at them, also in terms of the separation, between the buildings. I mean, there's no park space or anything, right? There's no like communal gathering space or anything?
There is, in this center portion, I mean, obviously, we've gotten to the point where we're trying to put so many trees in there that it's maybe not as communal as we'd like it to be. So we can probably, flesh this out a little bit to make it a little more usable. But that actually started out as more of a communal space, and then we said, let's just make it a beautiful treat area.
Well, considering you've got the 6 houses there with their
Yeah.
back, their back decks facing that space, I don't know.
It's pretty close.
Yeah, I mean,
agree.
if I was.
That was the other thing, you're right.
If I was looking at one of those houses and saw that my backyard, my deck backed up to this, public space, I don't know that would be so,
That's a fair point, yes.
I don't think that would be so attractive to me, that people like to go on their deck and,
Yeah.
have a little bit of privacy. So that certainly would concern me a little bit, but I think that's all I got right now. Martin, you have any?
I do have questions. So there's quite a long list of variances, and we'll only start at the beginning, actually, on this. I mean, this looks great. I have zero doubt that you'll sell every single one of them, and people will pick out a whole ton of extras, and that there's people in the community and nearby, Birmingham and elsewhere, that are going to definitely want this. It's certainly filling a market niche.
It's a whole, yeah.
I have a ranch, a 2,700 square foot ranch, and, don't have any plans on moving from that, so it's
Right.
gonna be perfect.
Sounded like you're gonna put a deposit down on one.
Yeah, so, I mean, this looks great. But I'm really struggling with how this is a how this fits in the zoning requirements for a one-family residential clustering option. And, I mean, all the variances, I don't know, it just turns it into something else that really isn't in the master plan or in the zoning requirements, and as much as I think it's a beautiful idea and that it'll sell like hotcakes, I just don't know how it fits within the current zoning requirements, and the variances don't really fix that in my mind. It
Yeah.
kind of meets some of the little rules that are written here, but doesn't fit the intent of this section.
Can I explain some of them?
Yeah, I do want to hear that, but
Yeah.
end with this one last thing,
Sure,
which is,
of course.
it doesn't, I don't know why there's another option. I mean, can we amend the zone, this section to have a different zoning or amend the master plan so that this actually fits as another option versus trying to come up with variances that, just it's a square, hole in a round, project.
Were you listening in on our initial conversations with Andrea? So
I have thought about it for a while and did closely read this, and there's, even the parallel plan you show me, I don't know how that fits with this clustering option, because
It
the
actually
clustering
is-
is supposed to be at the front
yeah,
and then broader
That's
at the
a fair point.
back, and your clustering doesn't show a front and a back
Right.
approach, so, and I don't think these others are clusters, there may be something a little different, but.
so I guess to answer that, I appreciate it. I'm glad you brought that up because I had meant to discuss it while I was talking. So a couple things, I think, and I want to be careful how we say this, but I think your ordinances are very antiquated. There are some communities that have, have a plan development ordinance, or somewhere like Northville, which I hate to say other communities, but they have an active adult community ordinance specifically for exactly what we're talking about. You don't have that, so we have to fit into the right categories. The PUD, you have a PUD, but that did not fit. We went back and forth many times on all of this. What I will say is, some of the variances I think are a little bit unfair in the respect that, so if you heard the 13.5-foot front setback, that's for a standard, typical road. This is a private road, so we're not having 13.5 feet to the road by any stretch of the imagination. We will have much more than that, and in fact, we're going to have at least 20 feet plus to the garages from either the back of a curb or from a sidewalk. So that variance really isn't, it's not a variance to what you see here. We're not shoving them up right against the road. We're just kind of being held to a 60-foot right-of-way, which doesn't make any sense in this type of development. So again, you're right, we're not fitting into your box. What I'm trying to say is I think the boxes should be fixed, but they're not.
I'd rather fix the box. I mean, I don't know whether that's like an impossible thing to say, but
Well, we
are
were
they
involved.
antiquated? Yeah.
We were involved with West Bloomfield and Northville for their updates, so we're willing to do that. Of course, we want to move forward, but, so I think there's, I don't want to speak for Andrew, but I think certainly there's something to that, and I've been saying that for a while. So that's the front setbacks. And I want to also point out that the Village of Bloomfield Grove has the exact same front setback variance. So it's just something that if you can imagine if we were held to, and I think it's like a 35-foot front setback or something, it's so excessive. Those homes at Bloomfield Grove would be, it wouldn't look like the way it is.
Yeah, as I understand it, if we just put this under our regular single-family home setup, you get about 14 homes.
Potentially, yeah.
Which probably doesn't make it feasible.
Well, it doesn't, and I don't think I don't think a single-family neighborhood makes sense right off of Telegraph either. So, no, we would not be interested in doing that and probably just continue to sit there. But I guess my point is kind of to agree exactly what you're saying is we're trying to work through the existing ordinances. And there were a lot of variances for Villas of Bloomfield Grove. Jim, how many did we have? We had like 18 of them. I remember sitting here and we had 18 of them and we're like, I don't like variances, I don't like going to the ZBA, but that seems to be the process that is in place to deal with these ordinances. So we're sort of continuing that pattern, and I know it doesn't sound good, but that is exactly what we did for Villas of Bloomfield Grove as well.
It was under the PUD development?
That was under a PUD, but it still had variances that.
Sure.
Yeah, it still had.
But it kind of, kind of looking at the variances one by one, isn't kind of how I'm looking at it. I just see this as a square, again, a square hole and a round peg. I mean, the variances are picking around the edges, but the intent of this is something different than what you're proposing. And as antiquated as it may be, I just don't see the fit to this. I see the fit for the market. I see the fit for the product. It's great. But somehow, is there another way? I mean, join us, please. And is there another way to, even maybe Andrew, you could address this. I mean, what we can do to make
We
this
could go through a
square peg
process
fit a
to-
square hole.
Yeah, we could go through a process to, in all due respect, modernize the ordinances so it would encourage what we think is good development and appropriate development on Telegraph Road for this. It's, as the variances were listed, not to exceed 10 acres. Our proposal is do 2 separate properties, both of which would be under 10 acres. There's no variance necessary. We would build them one day apart. So.
But
there
not
were-
on a cluster option,
yeah.
wouldn't fit.
Pardon?
Cluster
Yes.
requires a front and a back setup. The front could be clustered with 4.5
Well, I'm just-
units per acre. The
Well,
back
I'll
could be
get to
larger.
that one. I'll get
Okay.
to that one. But I mean, the 10, we're asking for a variance on the 10-acre
Sure.
size of the site. So the site we could do is 2 separate sites connected.
Yep.
And I don't think there's anything illegal about doing those separately. So that's a variance without a distinction. We could,
I agree
if
with-
you
I agree
didn't
with
want
that.
that variance, we'll just do it as 2 separates a day apart. So well,
Oh, I
mean,
agree,
I'm not trying to be
I
cute,
agree with
but-
that. Oh,
okay.
and I me neither. I agree with that
Yeah.
one. That's not really,
The blended
Yeah.
density is a request. It's under the allowable density under a parallel plan, but you're right, we have not rammed all of the houses up to the front. What we have done is met with the neighbors 3 or 4 times, and we have a letter that the board has offered in support of this. We've offered to help the association with some issues that we're probably in a better position to do. And we've said we will work with each individual neighbor on their viewscape concerns, because we are blending the density across the site. It's the same thing we did in Bloomfield Grove, where we met with individual neighbors and said, look, we're not interested in coming here and doing this project in a different community at a different time. We want to do it here and now, and we will address your concerns, which aren't ordinance concerns, they're neighbor concerns.
yes,
So-
thank you.
And we're going to continue to meet with them. There will be individuals who are not in support of that.
Oh,
But
yeah, no
we-
doubt. I mean, this could fit exactly what requires 0 variances to the ordinance, and the neighbors would still have questions, concerns.
Yes.
I mean, so I'm
So-
glad to hear that. Thank you.
So the side yard setbacks, we're trying to illustrate those, we're asking for something that's been approved in prior projects. That doesn't mean you'll approve it now. We did Bloomfield Grove with 1 entrance and no fire suppression. And in this case, we have 1 entrance, less units, and fire suppression. So we're trying to be good neighbors. The front yard setback, I mean, many communities say a 60-foot right-of-way is not necessary, and you can go down to 50-foot right-of-ways. What we're trying to do is get further away from our neighbors. So we're asking for a variance to make it better for our neighbors. So we can undo that and be 35 feet, and we won't ask for a variance. We think it's an irresponsible thing to do as a developer, but it requires a variance for us to get away from our neighbors and bring them closer to the street. And then I guess we've worked very hard on the wetland, and I think we're meeting the intent of what a good responsible developer would do, which is improve a bad situation with a bunch of cottonwoods and buckthorn that's pervasive across that site, and make it a real attractive wetland. So I don't want to say all our variances are good-natured variances, but they're trying to address specific concerns and neighbor concerns, and we're here to try and work with the township. It's in 35 years, it's a very difficult ordinance, and so I've only done this thing for 35 years in 20 separate communities, which has nothing to do with Bloomfield, but I am a resident in Bloomfield. And as a resident in Bloomfield, I think we should be supporting developments that encourage our residents to stay there, and you don't have that ordinance. And we'd love to help you with it and not come and ask for any variances, because this isn't hybrid stuff. This is ranch condominiums. 2,000 square feet above ground and 2,000 square feet in the basement, and you will get people coming like crazy
Oh, yeah.
to pay taxes and want to be here, and they're gone in the winter, and half of them are gone in the summer, and it's less traffic, and it's better taxes and less draw on services, and as Tim said, it does free up my 2.5 bath, 4-bedroom colonial, so somebody can move into the school soon. And that's a good thing too, and we bought 5 or 6 school sites, and even the schools recognize us coming in and doing condos, frees up housing for schools, which is, they're all in desperate need of additional students. So that's,
Yeah.
anyway, so I agree with you, we need a lot, but I think our variances are requested to try and help the neighbors in our meetings with the neighbors, which we are gonna, have they're meeting with their group, and we're gonna meet with them again before we get to you, so that's
Yeah.
a commitment to continue.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I think that there's the forest and trees thing here. The trees you're describing, the variances and the way it's designed, look great. I agree with it. I mean, the drainage plan, it's fabulous. I mean,
The engineer
I-
did that, those
I-
aren't just our error.
well, they're great. I mean, the way the water is brought to a particular area, I understand you even have a weir, in case there is even more than a 100-foot storm, so it can go out of the drainage at the bottom right in there.
That's the forebay, yes. Yep.
All of those concepts are really smart, using that not only as a I guess, a stormwater spot, but also as a wetland, which does improve. I know they're called wetlands, but it's mostly just because there's puddles there, a lot. So the quality of the wetlands could be improved, but so each of the trees you're talking about makes sense, but the forest, I don't see how it's a.
Well, I do think it's in your
single-family
purview to approve the request we have in front, and yes, there's variants that have to go to the ZBA. So I don't think we're necessarily asking for something that's out of bounds, other than the fact that we do have to have a couple variants, which we know the reason why.
No, I don't want to imply at all that you're being out of bounds. I really
Okay.
don't, because you're doing what you should be doing. I like creativity. We've had some recent creative proposals coming through, and I want to figure out how to do this.
Okay.
I think, but what, me anyway, one of my other hats is to adhere to the master plan, adhere to the zoning requirements, and I just don't see how this square peg fits in the round hole. And I'll be the first to admit that maybe I'm wrong and I'm just looking at the wrong, incorrectly. I'll see this again, I know, and reserve my final judgment. But I'm just telling you what I think right now from what I'm reading and seeing. I'd much rather figure out a way to make the rules reflect what is best for our community than try to sort of put this into something that doesn't fit.
Yeah, and I certainly don't disagree with that. It's obviously a timing thing. I mean, there's only so long we can actually have it under contract, and I think that's I know that's a long process, but because we've done it with other communities, so I don't have the answer either. But, I mean, we're more than happy to help lend our 80 years of experience with.
Right, to sort of rezone this, we'd have to change the master plan, which requires significant work, many notices, public hearings.
I don't know what you rezone.
I don't think it would be a reason, I would probably foresee that it would be, if there was a discussion about any sort of ordinance amendment, it would probably be another type of residential development site condo, if you will, which would still remain, the zoning would still remain as residential. But it would just have a different set of criteria to define something that we don't currently have.
That sounds great.
Okay.
So that's me, I'd rather work on something like that.
Okay, just a couple of simple questions. Andrea, you stated there was supposed to be a certain amount of trees on this property?
They are required, based on their tree removal plan, that tree removal plan, what they do is they give an analysis of the quality of the tree, the type of tree, health of the tree, and then based on that, they provide a required replacement value, and that's measured in caliper inches. And they're required to add 1,758 caliper inches of tree. And what has happened is they are proposing, again, as Tim had mentioned, they are proposing to add, I think you said 644 trees, if I remember?
Yeah, it's 644 is what we're replacing. We're only removing 485. But again, it's the DBH that it goes by, because
But you're adding 640?
we're adding, let me make sure I got it.
Because when I was adding these up current plan, I didn't come to that number.
I think they're counting, I think the plan
counting
maybe
with
was the
existing-
exterior, and maybe
Okay.
the
Oh, around the, okay.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's
these
all
are,
trees.
these are interior trees.
Yeah, it's all the trees,
Okay.
yes.
So you met with the other homeowner associations nearby, and they asked you to create a bigger buffer around the property, which you've done.
We actually came kind of guns a-blazing with a buffer and a setback, and then we added another 5 feet and a double row of plantings after those conversations, so yes.
And what would those plantings be around the border of the property? Do you know what?
I have a slide
put in
on
there?
that, yeah. So this is what we originally showed on the left and on the right. So we have 127 trees on the north and 95 trees on
Right.
the west.
Okay, and what kind of trees are they?
So those would be your evergreen.
Evergreen?
yeah.
Okay. And is there a fence that would go around there as well?
We're not proposing a fence, and the real reason for that is just because of the drainage, all the drainage that's coming. It just makes sense to keep it open. You know, the tree is obviously a very good buffer in that respect, so it can convey all the water appropriately.
And then some of these homes are,
Oh, thank you. There's also a power line on both sides, which the fence could not go under the power line.
gotcha, power line on the north and the west side?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. And then probably some of those houses that you're up against probably have fences, backyard fences,
Some do, yes.
right? Okay. And I'm not a plant or tree specialist, but my only question is you've got a lot that you've planted in here, and when I've seen people plant trees so close and they start to grow, they kind of can kill each other, right? So how do you properly then meet the requests of the neighborhood, but yet not get them so close that they have room to grow and mature?
So this is ultimate growth, but your point.
You're
though-
showing
though-
ultimate growth?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
you're right. I mean, yeah, obviously trees get very big and they get even bigger than what's shown here, but, we utilize a landscape architect who's obviously very respected in the business, so he does tell us when we get a little too close, you can't put trees that close, or, you know, a lot of times it's within a landscape island that's not wide enough, so he'll give us that. He designed this plan.
Okay, and it's comfortable that they'll mature
Yes.
into without taking each other out?
He is, yes.
And then this little storm water pond, the wetland area, is there a permit required from Eagle or any other state?
I would
Authority.
imagine not through Eagle, but through the county, the Water Resource Commission.
Yeah, sure.
Commission.
There'll
For
be
the
county,
county?
you know, drain, yes, but
Okay.
as far as Eagle, no, there's no regulation whatsoever.
Okay, and I was going back at your SEMCOG report, and you're really at a market for Jim's old age people, right? Yeah,
Yes.
that's really your market. Friends and family, right, absolutely, okay, yeah. And then you showed us, and Michael brought it up, other condominium and home development sites, which would be condo site developments up and down Telegraph Road. Michael wanted to maybe go look at a couple of them.
Yeah, of course.
When is our next design review board meeting?
Well, the June 4th meeting will not be held due to absences, other obligations. So I believe the next board is June 18th.
June 18th. And Jim, and Tim, what is your timeline on, would you build these all at the same time? You go in and build them at the same time, or you do it in phases?
That's a great question. So we build them as people buy them, right? So essentially, we'll want to start with land development, get the paving in to where we can get a model up. And then as we sell homes, we build them. We will build to specs, you know, from time to time as well. But in any given time, we'll probably be averaging probably 2 starts a month is what I'm guessing.
And what do you suspect, what's your forecast on time frame then for the full,
We'd love to develop this next year. And so with a 2 sale per month, you know, we're probably talking a 4 to 5 year time period before we're out completely.
and then you're gated, so are those gates then going to be functioning from the beginning, or do those
No.
gates go in when the whole project is completed?
No, in fact, Village of Bloomfield Grove, like I mentioned, I think it's in operation now, but I'm not even sure about that. So when we turn it over, we will give them the option to have the gates operational, but generally speaking, we keep them open throughout our construction period and then give them they might want to keep them open. I think on Losser, maybe they do decide to keep it open, but now that we're on Telegraph, my guess is they close them at night after we turn it over.
We didn't trust our trades, so we did not put them up for the entire project.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Because once you hit them a couple of times.
Yeah, and they're expensive.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then, Tim, did you say you're gonna have a curb cut with an egress lane coming off of Telegraph Road to come in to that, or did I not understand that correctly?
I believe, and again, and I'm sorry, and I'll, next time you see me, I'll have it completely figured out. I don't know if this has the exact geometrics of what, I think there will be a little bit of a lane.
A little bit of lane or a full lane?
I don't believe it'll be a full lane.
Okay, because that traffic really moves, you know?
It does, I think just the fact that it's 38 homes and the fact that, you know, they're not all coming home at the same time, they're not working typically,
Well,
they're retired, but yeah,
right.
my understanding is it's not a full lane. I will have that information though for you.
I think part of what happens too, isn't this where the lane eventually goes away? So they're
Oh,
barreling
yes,
down
you're
that
right.
hill.
You're right, it does turn into turns into a lane,
And the
thank you.
lane goes away, and then people are turning right on 14 Mile. Or when,
exactly
in the
right.
morning, they're commuting, they're battling the race, who can get down that hill faster. It's crazy. I've never done this myself. But yeah, that is gonna be a real challenge.
It is, because it's all downhill,
dangerous.
Yeah.
going south. You know, if you look from here and you look at the pitch, it just keeps going.
Yep,
And that traffic really starts to come together.
right, and again, we wouldn't do anything without MDOT's approval, but that jogs my memory. Yes, the reason why there's not a full right turn lane is because the lane does open up right there. It is.
The traffic report from Fishback noted that the site will generate 31, and Fishback is the township's traffic engineer who reviewed their Tetra Tech plan. The site will generate 31 trips during the AM peak hours, 8 in and 23 out, 40 trips during peak PM hours, 25 in and 15 out. So rounding out to be about 414 weekday trips. And Fishback does agree with that analysis. So that gives you a number, some projected numbers of traffic in and out.
It's just in that area, the roads come together, and, you know, if you have cars coming up on your tail like that, if there was an egress lane to move into, much safer for the community.
So I would recommend having something from
We
MDOT.
share your concerns.
Conversation with
MDOT's
that.
gonna tell us what to do, whether we
Right.
like it or not.
Right, I know that.
We will meet everything they tell us, and they won't listen to anything we say. They'll ask for our traffic,
We've
report
met
of
them.
yours, and then they'll make their determination, and we don't have any, unfortunately, we have no sway over it.
Yeah, either do we.
Yeah, we understand.
Okay. All right, any other questions or comments?
So
What are we doing here?
Are we asking to see it again in 2 weeks? Or
I mean,
Yeah,
what's the request
Okay,
here?
Tim, I guess I'd like to take your presentation and do some more homework and understanding of it.
Of course.
If you don't mind, and just table it, and then come back to our next meeting and then take a vote on it.
Okay.
What are we voting on?
Well,
move
it's
it
up
to the ZBA.
Is
or
that-
to the, so the next steps, if and when the design review board makes a recommendation to forward on, the next step would be a planning commission. Then we would have a wetland board hearing, which is the members of the planning commission, but they wear their wetland board hat, so it's a separate meeting because they're impacting wetlands. Then it would be zoning board of appeals, and then ultimately township board for final approval.
From the planning board.
Correct. Or
Right.
recommendations and information along the way, and results of ZBA would all be included in that final report.
So what would you like to do?
Okay, so we would make a recommendation to forward it on or not forward it on, or how does that?
we could table it, or we could take a vote on moving it to ZBA and planning, right?
That's correct. So whatever the makeup of the board is, you could choose to forward it on so that it goes to the next meeting. Or if you are making a determination that it should be tabled so that you can either get more information or do some research, then that would be a decision by the board.
Are you suggesting to table it?
Well, I thought Michael had some questions.
Yeah,
He'd
I
like
mean,
to go look at these other
I
sites.
I'm just having a really hard time accepting the density, and I'd like to look at these other comps that were presented, and understand what they, you know,
How they compare.
How they compare, and so that's where I stand, but obviously the board.
Yeah, and Martin?
I definitely am interested in the other comparables, and that's an important factor, being consistent. And I'm interested also in looking at timelines and possibilities with regard to, the other path I discussed and mentioned, so. And, I don't know, wouldn't want to, if we could pursue that, I personally would like to pursue that path. If it doesn't, maybe it wouldn't inordinately delay the process. I don't know about anybody else's opinion.
That would be a zoning ordinance amendment.
Yeah, yeah. Which would be, I guess, as Andrea's saying, good point, there'd be another option, building option, which might be, what do you call it, senior,
ACC is what they call
Yeah.
it.
As AAC, active adults condominium.
active adult condominiums. And then that would apply, throughout the township.
Okay. And so our next DRB is scheduled for
June 18th.
June 18th, okay. So Tim, if you're okay with it, let us do a little homework from your presentation. I think it's been a wonderful presentation with good information. I think myself, I like the project.
We think it's appropriate in this, it doesn't meet your ordinances the way they're configured.
Right.
We think it's an appropriate use given what else has happened in our immediate vicinity. We are committed to moving ahead with hopefully supporting tweaks here and there.
Right.
And I completely understand the board's concerns. So
Yeah, and I think you've done a great
Thank you.
job at working with the neighbors.
we're working
And
tirelessly with your
right,
neighbors.
that's fabulous. And I think you gave us a great description on the page where it shows if it were a cluster, right, like this?
Yes.
Versus doing it independently, which is probably a preferable method.
Yeah, I mean, we've attached units, the Heathers is all attached. We could do massive buildings with 2 stories to them.
Right.
Which is what we have to do if we attach them.
Right.
It would be unfortunate to bring that to the township.
I would throw one thing out. We actually, in Northville, the reason why there is an AAC ordinance is because we were building duplexes and nobody wanted to buy them. So we decided the only way we're gonna get out of this project is to detach them. So we worked with them on the ordinance, and then we actually came up with a detached plan, and the project went like that. So people want to have a detached.
Well, and that's why I'd asked you earlier about the HOA. Will it take care of all the buildings a similar way? Because I've seen this down in Florida, and every 7 years they do a section. It's wonderful.
But it stays pristine.
It does. And then they can pick and change their roof after a certain amount of time, or the color.
Yes,
And it really works out well.
yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank
So we'll table this
Before
and
we
we'll see.
pick a date,
Yes.
can I look at your calendar real quick? Not your calendar, but a calendar, because I want to just see where my availability is. I'm here. I don't have my calendar with me, so.
So here's May,
May.
and then flip up. Here's June.
So we would move it to the 18th.
Yeah, June 18th.
Okay, great. I'm here. I leave. I'm not here the 20th.
Okay, Michael, you're good? Okay.
Probably.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
So,
So do
do
we
we-
need to vote to table it?
I think it's an item on the agenda. I'm sensing that since it's so involved with the previous application, that perhaps your interest may be the same.
Yeah, for item number.
Yeah.
The next one?
Yeah.
Do we
Okay,
need-
thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Should we
So
move to
let-
table
well,
items B1 and 2?
Yeah, so we'll move to table items B1 and 2. All in
So
favor?
moved.
All support? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, wonderful. And then, recent design review board approvals, anything we need to review?
Thank you.
Thank
Not
you.
at this
Thanks a
time.
lot.
Okay. And then our next meeting date is set up Wednesday, June 18th. We'll see you all then. All adjourned. Say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Corey.